What's up, everyone? I'm here with my boy Alec, Soulful Guitar Lessons. Today we're going to talk about what it's like to be a studio session guitar player. I kind of had the idea of asking Alec, let's pretend that I hadn't moved to LA yet. This is my first day here, right?
Yep.
And I'm fresh out of music school. I'm feeling really confident. I can play all these licks, all these chord changes, whatever. And I'm going to my first studio session here, maybe for a pop artist, for an R&B artist, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. How do I prepare for my first session? What are things that, you were like, wow, I wish I would have known this before I went to my first session? Mm-hmm. Do I have to bring all my gear? There's obviously so much to unpack, so.
There is a lot. And I feel like, I know you're asking me that, but we could both definitely respond, because we've both been in those situations. And
100%.
I feel like, well, if you're just moving here and you got called your first day, that's awesome. You're killing it already.
Thank God.
You got called for the pop or R&B gig, that's great. So I guess the first thing would be, this is the hard thing. I think the business would be, unfortunately, number one.
Yeah.
Which can be dicey. But yeah, having just a conversation, not verbally is always good, but you want something written down, right?
100%.
And if somebody's not down to do that, it's usually you're kind of
red flag.
A red flag.
YouTube demographics tells me that over 80% of my viewers are not subscribed to this channel. If you're enjoying this video, please take a second, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell. This just helps all of my videos, all my guitar lessons make it to you so you can really enjoy them, and it helps me out along the way. Thanks so much for watching.
Again, maybe it's a blessing in disguise that it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, but say you got your business all.
And when you mean business, you mean am I getting paid? Is this for royalties or splits or credit or?
Yeah, and it's kind of like the boring yawn part of everything, and I think it's also the part where musicians could buy a house or they're living in squalor. I feel like that's the big difference.
And I remember the first few sessions I did, I was just so excited that I got called for anything. I was like, I didn't even think of that. You know what I mean? And looking back, I could have been getting paid, but these producers saw me as this fresh new guy who could play. So they're like, oh, well, I don't know if they were taking advantage of me or if they were just oh, he didn't ask to get paid, so thanks for showing up.
Thanks. Anyway,
and it's also when I first started going oh, I need to make money and pay rent. It was uncomfortable. I felt super awkward being hey, so can I get $100 for this, or can I get $500 for that?
Right.
And that's something I always try to stress to people, whether they're in the studio or going on tour, whatever. I always use the example a plumber. If my toilet clogs up and I call a plumber, he has no problem being it's gonna be $650, and I'm okay, here you go. Right?
Or you'll be no, I'm gonna try someone else, and he'll be okay. Cool.
Yeah, you know what
He's
I mean?
not oh my god, my feelings are hurt.
Yeah, it's cool, call someone else. It's all good.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of magic in that, because for whatever reason, every time a musician is oh, I feel really scuzzy and guilty asking for money, or I don't want them to think I'm greedy, or
because it's hard, because it's not like a toilet where you're fixing. It's you're making something creative, and people are very emotional about their art, and they feel, but all that aside, right? We got to eat, and there's bills, and houses don't pay for themselves, and rent, So anyways, I think once you have your business in order, maybe ask your first time for $500.
Yeah. That's a good starting spot.
Maybe that's what you asked for first. But then, okay, what do you bring? I feel if I was in Nashville, this answer would be totally different. But I feel as in LA, you it's kind of anything goes. I would probably bring a bunch of guitars, maybe some weird guitars too that give you weird sounds, and I would have a pedal board that's analog and digital as well. So I'd have a Kemper, but then I'd also have some cool pedals that could make sounds on the fly.
Exactly. I kind of approach it the same way, where sometimes you get a little insight from the producer. They're just bring a delay pedal, because that's all we need for this one sound.
Right.
And I find half the sessions now, everyone's just plugging DI right into the board.
Yes.
And then the producer is doing the tone after the fact anyway. So it's sometimes I've even brought my whole pedal board, an amp, and a Kemper, and been cool, I'll dial up the sound. They're just plug in DI. And I'm what do you mean? Just plug in DI. And they're like, oh, I'm going to run it through a synth and make your guitar sound so weird. You know what I mean?
It like hurts your guitar soul.
Yeah.
But it's...
And that's like a whole nother thing that I want to talk about is like, remember that I was just telling you before, like the first couple sessions I did, you know, I should have really just been playing something.
Now we're getting into the playing,
Yeah, like super simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But I had just got out of music school, so I was like, like I wanted to play everything.
You wanted to be killing.
Yeah, I wanted to be killing. Because it was like, you know, we're posting videos on Instagram, and every 10-second video is some crazy fast, important, shreddy lick.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I can't just play that one triad. They're going to think I suck.
Right.
Right? Where in reality, they don't give a shit what you're playing. They want you to play what they want the song and what's going to serve the song, you know? And that was a big lesson for me, which I'm still kind of learning. It's like our guitar ego wants to shine through.
Yes. So yeah, I guess if you're like Santana, then you can shine through. Shine. You crazy diamond. But if it's just like you're just getting out of college and you're trying to find your footing, I feel like one thing that's helped me is like everything on guitar, especially on a recording, should be singable. Like it should be like a singable phrase.
Huge.
Like if I can't sing my part, or like, because that's usually what a producer will say to you, like, hey, can you play da, 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 da,
exactly,
da, da, and then you try to do that. And if you can't sing it, like it's a bad part.
Yeah, no one's ever gonna recommend.
No. Right. Unless it's like a weird avant-garde, but like again, we're talking about pop, R&B, that kind of thing. It's got to be like singable phrases, you know. I don't know. Are there any? I don't know. When you went to your first session here, like what did you bring versus what do you bring now?
Yeah, I mean the first again, I didn't know like what the heck was going on, so I just brought my amp and my pedal board at the time, and I was like mostly playing jazz, so it was like a reverb pedal, a tuner, and an overdrive. Like that was it, you know. And like that session, they wanted like heavy bar chord, power chord, like rock stuff. You know what I mean? Like all just like down, like fat, just whatever it was. And I was like sitting there in the corner. I was like, well, I think it would be cooler if we did like
not the vibe.
You know what I mean? And they're like, no, that's not what we want. You know. And now, like what I bring, kind of what you were saying, I try to bring a couple different guitars. You know, I usually bring this. This is like my Swiss Army knife. Yeah. Because it just sounds good. Yeah. And then like I'll bring like a weird, you know, a single coil guitar, like a Tele or a Strat. And then something weird, like I have like a baritone or a like rubber bridge sound, like you have that one too, you know. Even if the producer's like, oh, we just want this one sound, I'm gonna bring the other weird ones, because once they hear it, like everyone in the room, it's like, wait a minute, maybe we'll use this, you know? And I'm always a believer of like, it's better to just have more and not use it than not have it and not have the option, you know?
Yeah, because you never know. Like you might be warming up and they'll be like, wait, what was that? That was sweet.
Exactly. So, you know, I honestly haven't brought an amp to a session in years. The only time I have now is like if there's one there and they want to use it.
Which is kind of rare sometimes too. Even like big studios.
Twice. Yeah. Maybe twice. Yeah. You know? Otherwise they're like, yeah, we'll do the Kemper or the pedal board direct to the fucking board.
Because the Kemper has the stereo out but also a direct out, so you can get exactly what you're talking about. Like, oh, I want, and usually there's no reverbs or delays either when you're like doing the Kemper thing. Yeah. Like it just
they want to dry.
Yeah. Like kill that, even if it's overdriven. Like
100%. Like I've even had producers like split my signal from my board and DI, so it's like they'll get a straight just DI nothing sound from the guitar as well as my affected tone. Yeah. And they're like, just in case we decide we want to do something different, I have both signals, you know? Right.
So I guess that's like the technical side. What about like your headspace? Or, you know, like how you dress or just your attitude in general? Like what, I don't know, how'd you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought I was a superstar. I was like, oh, they're calling me because they want me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm Santana. They want my sauce, which is why I thought everything was going to be this big jazzy chord shred fest, you know? And now my approach is kind of like, okay, I go in, like, depending on what the vibe is, like if I'm producing on it, then it'll be a little bit different. Like I'll make more artistic choices or recommendations.
Yeah.
You know, but if I get in there and they're like, the song's 90% done, and they're like, we just need to cut these 3 guitars.
Yep.
I'm not going to be like, oh, you know what would be cool if we did that, you know.
Yeah.
So I kind of just try to read the room, you know.
Yeah.
What like
that's that read the room is a great like catchphrase, because it's true. It's like you don't want to stick out probably too much, especially if you're not producing.
Right.
You know, just kind of do your job. And there's a lot of waiting around too, right? You're like, you don't want to be like, oh my God, when am I going? Like, what, you know, like you kind of like a lot of, you know, like bring
hours.
Yeah, it could be hours. It could be like all, you know, some of these sessions start late.
Yep.
So like just have something else to do. Maybe bring a laptop. Or
100%.
Like,
And that's a funny part of it that you don't really think about, you know, because sometimes, you know, someone will be like, oh, just come cut guitars, I'll give you $500 real quick, whatever. And you'll get there at 8 p.m. You won't cut till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And then you get home at 5. And you're like, my whole next day is messed up because I haven't slashed it. Like, and I just, you know, you're not getting paid by the hour, but you can't be salty about that.
No.
Because if you start having an attitude, you're just not going to get called back.
Yeah, it's like a bad vibe. And who wants to make music with a bad vibe?
Exactly. Have you ever had a session where you've had to read music? Where someone has handed you a chart with notes on it?
Yes.
The little black dots.
Yeah.
Whatever those things
throwback,
are.
Yes, I have. It's really... it's rare, but it definitely happens.
Yeah.
And I would rather have that in my bag than not.
100%.
Like, so, I mean, it's just good to know how to do it. It's maybe like 5% of the times I would get called, but there, you know, if you're doing like if you're working with any composers or film scores, like you're gonna have to know how to do that. Yeah. And it's better to know it than not know it. What about for you?
I maybe once or twice ever. Yeah. One was for a film thing.
Yeah.
And it was very specific.
Yes.
You know, they were like, this is the part. It's no different than if you're like a violin player in an orchestra.
Yeah.
It's like you can't just be like, oh, I'll kind of just do this.
Yeah,
and then maybe do that. Yeah. They're like, nope, you played the wrong. And even I remember he was like listening and watching from the booth, which was super intimidating. Yeah. And like at one point he was like, the rhythm and the beat 3 bar 4 was wrong, and I think you sustained the F sharp too long. I was like, oh my God.
It's like he's really listening.
He's really listening, you know? And again, it's one of those things that like I'd rather know than not. It's not something I work on nearly enough, you know? If you were to throw a lead sheet in front of me right now, I would need to take a second to work it out.
And I think that's normal. Like you can be like, hey, let me look the chart over for like a
100%.
second, and then.
So it's not like cutthroat. It's not like they give it to you, and if you mess up once, like you're fine.
No. Especially if you're like the vibe is good and you're playing your parts well. I will say there's this one time where I was playing and I thought I was killing it, but the producer was saying, hey, like you're playing it like you would play live. So like an example that like everyone know, well, like let's use an example like Uptown Funk. You know, like that intro.
Yeah.
So like in the record, I'd probably go, but live I go. All that little in between is like horrible for the studio. It's like make it as concise as possible.
100%.
And if you're like doing all this, like it's kind of not the vibe. Like just make the part as small and as like powerful as possible. And I was like, oh wow, that was actually a good learning moment for me. I was like, oh. Okay, that like makes sense.
Still something I battle, you know, especially if I'm like coming off of playing a lot live, and then you jump back into the studio, and it's even if it's just something simple like that, you know, like, you know, live I would go,
yes,
all that in between stuff, and then for the sessions, it's just
space.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I've even had, I remember like the first few sessions I was doing, where I was always playing live. I was not a studio guy by any means. And I would do all that shit, you know, like take live. And then I would watch the producer like cut out, literally cut every note I played and then mute everything in between. And I was like, oh, I could just replay that. You don't have to mute it. And he's like, oh, that would be great, thanks. Like, you know, so it is fascinating to see like the difference in technique, tone, playing, execution, live versus the studio. Because I feel like most guitar players, when we're practicing for a show, we're practicing for live use, right? So it really, I'd say like restraint is one of the biggest things for the studio. It's like, how do I hone in on what the record needs and not make it about my guitar playing self, and also make it for the record as opposed to, oh, this is gonna sound sick, people are gonna go crazy, you know.
Yeah. So much too is like making a guitar sound not like a guitar, in like a weird, you know, like have it, and what I mean is like give it character, so it doesn't just sound like a normal guitar, because like we've all heard that sound before, so 100%. You want to paint this sonic landscape that's unique, you know, and like how do we do that? Well, we're probably gonna throw a bunch of weird effects on it, you know. Are there any like go-to effects that you would use or you've seen folks use,
I mean,
to give it that weird sound?
Outside of like the usual, you know, like whatever,
what are the usual if somebody's like,
I would say like, for me, if I'm going to a session, I would want like an overdrive, a delay, a reverb, and then some modulation, like a chorus, something like maybe a flanger. Those are kind of like quintessential. You know what I mean? You want to be able to basically hit any tone that's requested. That's a huge thing too. A whole nother thing, honestly, is like knowing your gear and knowing your guitar well enough to get a specific sound. Right? I mean, half the time I'm in the studio, they'll play me a reference. They'll be like, oh, we want like this guitar sound, and they'll play me like 4 songs on Spotify, and they'll be like, can you do that? And if you're like, I don't know how to get an 80s rock tone, you know, they're gonna be like, okay, we'll see you later. But it is, you know, going back to the weird tone stuff, you know, I use this pitchfork quite a bit, which is super weird. You can basically get any interval on it. You can
That's awesome.
Do 3 octaves up, 3 octaves below. Just really sometimes I'll put like a rubber band on the string or a paper clip on the string, like creative. Just making weird stuff, you know. Unless I'm going to record like a acoustic strum, you know what I mean. Most people are open to getting weird sounds, especially for like textures and stuff. You know, I'd say like half the sessions I do these days are just like you wouldn't know it was a guitar if you heard it. It would sound like a synth or something. You know? I think the biggest thing is really like knowing your gear. Like you asking me to create a sound, and me already knowing like, okay, I need to put the gain up on this pedal. I need to put the delay here. This like being so familiar and well versed with how it works, so you're not wasting like 20 minutes to dial up each sound in the studio is huge, and that I feel like gets you called.
I would agree
more and more. You know,
I mean, touching on that and riffing on that is like, normally people aren't going to be speaking guitar. You know, they're going to be like, I want a like, I want it feeling like you're driving down the highway and there's somebody chasing you and it's like dusk. Like, can you do that on guitar? And you got to translate that information 100%. And then make it happen. You know?
Especially if it's the artist asking and they're like...
Because they're not going to say, hey, play me a G major 7. Rooted. No, they don't say... Like, nobody talks like that.
Make it purple.
Dang, that's hard.
Like, okay.
Right. So, like, interpreting people's, like, creative... I don't know how you... Like, their way of thinking of music and then interpreting it for guitar is like a huge task.
And
like
being able to being able to riff off of that, you know, and give them options, I guess is a good thing. If someone's like, oh yeah, I want this like do 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 part that sounds like that here, it's good to be like, okay, like here's 2 ideas I can give you right away. You know what I mean? And then they'll be like, oh, I like the second one, but maybe let's change something there. Being able to adapt and not just be like, well, I only have this one idea, and if you don't like it, now my ego's hurt, so I don't care. Tell me what to play now, you know? So absolutely, that's huge, absolutely huge.
Are there any other go-to pedals? You said like the EHX pitchfork that you make stuff sound wonky and weird. Is there anything else?
Another one I just got, the Microcosm, the hologram. What's it called?
I've seen those ads. Man, they make those ads look
super crazy. Pretty. That and the Chroma console. Super fun. The Microcosm, I will say, is a bit of a one-trick pony. But the Chroma console gives you so much. It's like a multi-effects unit, right? So you get all the different things.
What's the difference between that and a multi-effects then? In your opinion?
It's a little more. It's a little more analog feeling and less digital. You can't like tweak on a big screen. Everything is just knobs. So it's a little less like traditional, like a Line 6 or something. Which are also amazing.
They're so good for the studio.
What are you bringing to the studio?
It depends. I kind of try to read the room, but it's very similar. Like I'll bring an acoustic, couple electrics, humbucker, single coil, some pedals. I love bringing like the Kemper, but also the Line 6, because the Line 6 to me, like it has so many crazy effects that sound and then I like line them all up, and I just get I have like pre-built some weird wonky patches, so I can just like kind of throw and go. I'm like, oh, boom, like there it is. Like I don't have to even like dial in a sound, hopefully.
100%.
And those two things usually get me like, it'll usually get me 9% of the way there. And then I'll bring an analog rig if I feel like it's that vibe, you know? I would never show up to like John Mayer's session. Not that he's calling me because he clearly knows how to play guitar, but I would never show up with my Line 6. He like, let's go, buddy. Like, he'd be like, okay.
Amazing.
But yeah, very, very similar. And if you have any weird guitars, like there's the Fender Pawn Shop, like the Fender 6 is awesome. Like that thing is just a whole vibe. Like anything that it's weird, like people want sometimes banjos or like, you know, mandolins or like you said, the rubber bridge, maybe a baritone rubber bridge, like something that'll give a unique texture that's not like so stock. You know?
100%.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my experience.
Amazing. So, I mean, we talked about, I'd say the most important thing, honestly, out of all this, aside from the playing and everything, is like making sure you take care of the business. That's always a huge thing. And that's in any lane, whether you're touring, anything in music, you're always going to have to fight for your own paycheck, which is super annoying, but that's just the nature of the industry. But something I wished I would have known way earlier on.
A lot of artists will use young, eager musicians to be like, hey, you know, you're gonna have my name on your resume, so it's gonna be a launching point for you. So it's actually, so it's like, it depends how much,
this is gonna be such good exposure for you.
So it's like, if you feel like that exposure is worth more, like if you're okay taking an L on it, but like in the long term, you're like, oh, you know, like I guess that's up to you. But like our advice would definitely be, okay, get your money,
get paid,
get that thing in writing, get paid.
And yes, writing, getting things in writing.
Kids on the phone call thing.
Phone call, the amount of times I've had like promises on the phone call, and then in real life, broken promises.
Like,
so it's good to be able to go, oh, well, here you said this, so, well, whoopsie.
Like, there's actually a track record rather than like just, anyway.
100%.
So yeah.
Amazing.
Best of luck. If you have, like we started off with, you know, if you have a studio session on your first day moving to LA, you're doing pretty good. So.
Yeah, you're killing it, honestly. So, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, pop them below. We'll both be there responding to them. Make sure you check out Alec's channel here. It's going to be linked right below. And thanks so much for being here.